by itself. So let's keep going. Then I went back to deplatformings. There was the removal of monetization. I talked about Ford Fisher's situation, which is interesting, and it seems like YouTube has behaved very erratically, and I can't take it upon myself to try to explain what happened. But the one thing I will say is that with some of the other creators like David Pakman, it seems like major media companies are interfering with independent creators with bogus DMCA copyright strike downs that they know are fake in order to disrupt them, because they feel that the independent creators have lower costs and are a threat to the jobs of people in major media companies. Tim Pool talks about this a lot. My hat and everything, but and Pakman talks about this. Pool talks about it a lot. The major media, then some of the mid-sized media companies like BuzzFeed have had a lot of layoffs because their clickbait model isn't really working that well anymore. And then there have been major scandals. I don't think I mentioned this right here, but in late January of 2019, there was an incident on the Mall where a group of students from a Catholic high school in Kentucky, Covington, Kentucky, had a confrontation with a Native American, Nathan Phillips. And the Covington kids, one kid in particular, were blamed for how they behaved. And what happened is when you went back and looked at all the video and found out what the context of that confrontation that you heard about so much, it changed the interpretation of the context already. And so a lot of the major media figures, some of them wound up getting sued for defamation. So the mainstream media is in its bubble. It tends to be biased towards its own view of liberalism, and it seems also to be biased trying to get rid of Donald Trump, which is understandable. But the mainstream media makes a lot of mistakes. So independent journalists like Tim Pool and David Pakman are commentators, and Ford Fisher, maybe Matt Christensen, other commentators, other people, and I think myself in a slightly different way, provide a check on mainstream media, questioning their work and finding mistakes and finding major things that they've overlooked. One of the things I've talked about is that it's completely right for mainstream media to talk about climate change and present all the data, and I'm 100% with them on that. But they overlook some other national security things. They've overlooked talking about the security for the power grid. And there were some stories that the media didn't really pick up on as much, that North Korea might be able to knock out a lot of our power grid. Even James Woolsey said that in, I think, early 2017. And that still hasn't been accounted for very much by the mainstream. So there's some serious national security issues that the mainstream media has been inconsistent in reporting. Will Ripley at CNN is very good. I like his detailed reporting on North Korea and everything. But the rest of the reporting from the mainstream sites has not been as consistent on the seriousness, particularly of North Korea, as it could be, in my opinion anyway. I think other journalists working on their own might be able to add more information to the fire. But let's go on. I talked about the DMCA abuse. There's another couple of wrinkles that have come into play. Congress, and the House has already passed it. Congress has introduced, and the House has already passed, a CASE Act, CASE, which allows the Copyright Office to set up a small claims court to do binding administrative resolution of copyright claims much more quickly and with lower costs than court trials. Now that sounds like a good thing. So with independent creators, that means that independent creators are much more likely possibly to go after people, particularly photographers, that have gone reproduced their work without license. The problem is that it could attract more trolls like Right Haven, and the question is how good will the Copyright Office be and in setting up, making sure that they don't honor claims from trolls. Now the act hasn't passed the Senate yet because and all the distraction with the impeachment, it's not clear. It'll probably pass in early January, and then it'll take maybe 9 months or so for the Copyright Office to set this thing up. So probably by the beginning of 2021, there will be, this tribunal, and the Copyright Office will be in existence. I would worry that a lot of stuff, particularly pictures, photographs that people put in blogs, even stuff I put in my blogs, where maybe you've taken a picture of a painting someplace outdoors or something, panorama type things, that might generate claims, and I wouldn't be able to go through, and the Copyright Office will probably have to make a rule as to what it considers a legitimate claim with some of these things that are controversial and not settled, and what it would honor and what it wouldn't. And then there will be a fight over it, just like we have fights over everything. So you can expect there to be the Case Act to pass, and then for the Copyright Office in a few months to promulgate some rules and put them in the Federal Register. There'll probably be a comment period, but there could be a lot of bloggers, even myself, could be in trouble if we've been too lenient with particularly panorama shots in our own photographs that we use in our blogs. I use a lot of Wikipedia pictures, but I always give attributions. But again, Wikipedia, they're going to have to, some of those listings could have gone away and so forth. They would have to work with Wikipedia and other sources, the Creative Commons, the CCSA 3.0 licenses and so forth. They'd have to work with them and work out very specific procedures. It will not be as simple to do as the people who wrote the law think it would. Then you probably, we're getting to the stuff that is the most recent. On December 10th of this year, YouTube changed its terms of service rules. And the most controversial thing, there are two things that are controversial. One of them that you first heard about was they said that if their provision of their service to a particular user or group of users was no longer commercially viable, they could terminate the user. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a user like me that doesn't make money with his posts, because I just make very short videos that I put in blogs. I don't use the YouTube channel the way other people do. I just simply embed them in blogs, and I'm not even trying to be monetized. I don't have anywhere the volume with my YouTube. I haven't learned to be a skilled filmmaker, which is why I came over here to be filmed, because I can't really do this at home real easily myself. And so, so the whole idea is that the fear was that if you were too small and if you didn't have any prospect of being monetized in the future, they might just shut you down. They say now that that isn't very likely. That isn't what they meant. They meant if you were a bad actor and they needed an excuse. Or if Congress passes some other kind of law in the future that makes their downstream liability a lot more riskier, like Section 230 is weakened even more, maybe they would cut us off. That's more what it means. The bigger problem is COPPA, which is not the same as COPA, Child Online Personal Privacy, the Child Online Privacy Protection Act. YouTube had a big settlement with the FTC this past summer where YouTube had been using persistent identifiers or cookies. What happens is that children, people under 13, you don't have to sign on to YouTube to view a video. And YouTube had been collecting cookies from minors, watching videos that the FTC says are directed at kids, were actually made to attract children. Like videos about toys and nursery rhymes and child actors and various kinds of things, cartoons and so forth. Gamers got very concerned because you could assume that many computer games are thought to be directed to kids or animation. So there's a tremendous controversy, and there's also it's a little bit too complicated here. There's a channel called Hogue Law. Richard Hogue at Virtual Reality has discussed the mixed audience problem. One idea is that YouTube could require an age gate. You could have a silent age gate that the first time you look at a video from any computer, it asks you if you're under 13. They could try to do that. You could put age gates in routers, which is something I know is possible, and that's an issue that came up with the COPA, Child Online Protection Act trial back in 2007, and they said it wasn't possible. Well, now it is, because companies like Cox and Comcast and so forth offer guest accounts, so you could have a situation where a parent simply treats the child's account as a guest account and is set up when the guest account is in use, not to allow the use of persistent identifiers. That could be a way around the COPPA, and that could be a way around the mixed audience issue. And that hasn't been pursued as much because YouTube doesn't want to do things that would seriously interfere with traffic and seriously interfere with profits. So there's a big controversy about that, and Hogue Law is probably the best channel to get detailed information on, because Richard Hogue has maybe 5 or 6 hours of video you can watch. There are a couple of other YouTubers who went and talked to the FTC and brought some information back. It's not as horrible as we first thought, but it is a potentially big problem. There have been a couple of other things. One of them, 2 or 3 other things. One of them is that in the course of the impeachment, several conservative sites published the name and face of the whistleblower, and I'm not going to repeat the name today. But most Twitter has not banned it, but Facebook and YouTube have banned, and I presume Blogger, because Blogger belongs to Google, have banned mentioning the name of the whistleblower, even though it's been published before by Breitbart and Heavy and a few other sites. Now, if it's previously published information, it violates journalistic integrity if you can't publish it again. But YouTube, again, is taking a long view. These platforms don't think that amateur journalists and independent journalists should be thought of as journalists. Their work should not be regarded with the same degree of credibility as a professional news organization, which is one of the things that this fight is all about, is to basically who is a journalist. And that gets into a philosophical thing I'm going to kind of close this video with in just a minute. Let me mention a couple of other things. You're starting to see, at least Fox News, and there may be other sites that do it, won't let blogs link to their articles anymore. I talked about the link tax a while ago in Europe. Well, if you try to link to a Fox News article right now, you'll get an HTTP 403 error. It could be that over the future, a lot of sites now have paywalls, and I've which are, I suggested it's too much trouble to subscribe to too many sites at a time. I suggested that sites, the subscriptions be bundled so that you can sign onto an account and get maybe 10 or 20 newspapers. But some of these sites want to monopolize your experience of the news. They want you to get your news through your family or through some sort of information hierarchy like it used to be before there was user-generated content. They don't want people getting their news from everything else because they can't make any money. That's one of the reasons why newspapers are having a hard time, because it's so much easier to get stuff free and everything. Okay. And then there's another problem. There was a court opinion in New York State in 2018 that said that despite an earlier ruling back in 2000 or something, that said that embedded images are not necessarily to be treated as links. Normally when you link to something, that's not considered copyright infringement. Except in Europe they have the link tax. They still have the link tax anyway. In the United States it's not considered infringement. There's a ruling in New York State, at least with embeds, which show a picture from it's a so-called server rule. It's the content is on another server. It's not on your site, but the browser will show the information as if it were on your site. There is a ruling in New York State. I don't think the judge said that may be infringement sometimes, and there's supposed to be a trial about it, and I don't think that it's happened yet. Breitbart was the defendant. The conservative site was another defendant. Well, Breitbart, of course, likes to leak things, just like in the whistleblower case. Where I'm getting to, what is this all coming down to? Where is this all headed? There are so many of these problems that I think you're heading toward a world where if you want to publish, you'll have to be screened, and you want to put your stuff out in a place where anybody in the whole world can see it. You'll have to be screened for the right to do that. So what are the things that might happen if the world gets to be like that? Well, what's going on, for example, in China, you know what a social credit score is, don't you? Let social credit system, what that is. What that is, what that is. In other words, you get a score on how good a citizen you are. Well, imagine where that can go. Now, I know that it's jaywalking and littering and stuff like that, and China counts against you. So China has such a surveillance society right now that they can actually do that. But you could check: do people volunteer? Should volunteerism or national service be required? Is volunteering just for the sake of volunteering a good thing, just for showing up on Thanksgiving dinner to serve people or something, or delivering meals or something? Is that occasionally, or should you belong to something and should you have a regular commitment to it? Maybe you aren't allowed to have your own website until you can prove you can raise money for a nonprofit. Now, that brings up the issue of compelled speech, right? Some people think that the reason for this is, and it's something I went through last spring when I made up that little video called the Dangerous Thought Experiment. People that claim they're oppressed, particularly on the left, all the different groups on the left, what they need is to have people join them, and they need people demonstrating and carrying signs and sharing in their hunger strikes and everything else. Like, let's take something like the Extinction Rebellion with climate change, those big demonstrations at the beginning of September. They don't need to, although they want Ford Fisher goes and films all their demonstrations. And yes, because they know that there are people like him out there who'll go and film them. They know they can get attention to their causes. But somebody like me who doesn't really have a big audience and doesn't have the same level of skill set, at least as a videographer, they want somebody like me to join them and join them, okay? Because if there are too many people like me around who do what I do and then don't participate in their activities, but simply write about them or even take pictures of them, which I do, and blog about them, but don't actually join, their solidarity is weakened, right? I refuse to think of myself as a victim. I would feel psychologically ashamed to be thinking of myself as a victim. Why? Because I am much older. I grew up at a time when people were measured by how well they competed with other people. That's just the way it was. I grew up kind of getting off on that. I don't feel very good about the idea of being expected publicly to promote the idea that somebody is a hero, when I don't think they are. I don't want to personally have to pimp the idea that something is beautiful or attractive if it's not to me. You see what I'm getting at? This gets in, and I get email after email asking me to donate. Truth Out is constantly I wonder if I've got one of their emails here. I have to show you their emails. If I've got one on here. See if I can find it. Truth Out. See if it finds it. We're almost, look at this. Just take a look at this. We're almost out of time. I get these emails from them every 3 or 4 days, desperately begging for money. And they just do this, they threaten to shut down. They say only we are the independent voice, only we can protect you, you have to join us. And some of their articles are actually good, and some of them are real far left way to the left and everything, but some of their articles are actually good. But I refuse to be forced or coerced or expected to join a left-wing effort that brags about being a victim and about how many victim groups I belong to in order to have a right to be heard. I just refuse to do that. Now this is a little bit alarming because I am concerned about the future of my own writing. I'm getting older. First of all, if something happens to me, who can support it? Well, no one else really knows the entire setup right now to support it. And then there are questions, any of the things I talked about today could affect me, in unpredictable ways. So far I've kind of dodged the bullets, but I'm not going to dodge them forever, I'm afraid. So that's why, and then there's the issue that I don't want to get into this today too much, but my Do Ask, Do Tell mark expires at the end of 2021, and there would be questions about the renewal of it because it might be something other people want that could be a lot more commercial. I don't want to get into that right here because it's complicated and it's uncertain and subjective and everything. But I probably will scale. I've announced even online that I expect to scale down my activity at the beginning of 2022, after the election, after the first year of the next administration. I don't expect to be staying in with blogging and doing things the way I've been doing it for the last 20 years. At some point it has to stop. I expect to archive everything so that it would be available so that people could find it if they want it, if they wanted to purchase it. But I don't expect to be able to blog and post things forever, you know. And I'm going to be saying a lot more specifics about that in blog posts pretty soon. But one question is, what do I do? What would I do? Well, I'm not going to just join a nonprofit and brag about being a victim and go and do the things that people usually do. But think about the implications of that. You know, if I say that, and that's inviting somebody with authoritarian tendencies, say like Donald Trump or Pence or anybody like that. If we can just get rid of these people, we can, because they're not going to fight, they're not going to resist. We can take over because once they're gone, they don't want to fight for anything. We'll just take over and we'll set up our authoritarian society and we'll put everybody in their place, and the world will be perfect because it runs the way we think it should run, and everybody will be told what their place in life is, and that'll be the end of it. So if people say they're not going to join up and they're not going to fight, which is practically what I said, that's inviting a problem, isn't it? This is really disturbing. But I think we're heading for a world where if you want to be online in a couple more years, you're going to have to join something. And I said that before a couple of years ago. And you have to be able to support things you don't believe in necessarily. I don't want to get into promoting, and I don't know how much this is really going on. I've heard stories, but I don't want to get into promoting gender transitions for minors without, just because in middle school, just because when their parents object or something. I've heard really radical stuff going on. And some people are demanding that it be supported. You know, I don't want to even go near anything like that. But think of the implications. If you aren't willing to fight for other people when you have to, you're going to wind up with an authoritarian society. You're going to wind up with China. You're going to wind up with a social credit system. That's where we're headed. And it's very alarming when I think about it. So that's kind of what I had today. Well, the main thing I want you to get out of it is not just one issue. There's about 20 different issues. And any one of them can become a serious problem for a content creator. The one you've heard about in the last month or so is COPPA. There's another law called the California Consumer Protection Act, which if you collect, similar to COPPA in the sense that even if you have visitors in California to get a certain volume of personal information taken, you could be sued even if you're out of state. That's another, you haven't heard much about that yet. I didn't put that on there. That's another potential problem that's coming pretty soon. Congress has a law called COPRA, C-O-P-R-A, being considered, which would be similar to California's CCPA, which again is similar, which is a kind of a COPPA for everybody, that people have to be able to get out. Well, the whole internet of free content has been based on persistent identifiers by and large, which give you things you want to see. Which for an adult is great because I see other stuff that's similar to what I've already looked at. But if you're raising kids and you have a family, and because you had intercourse with women, which I haven't had, because I didn't do the things other people do. Well, it's serious though. I didn't do the things other people do, so I'm not as exposed as some people are to some kinds of privacy concerns. I don't have the same exposure. But in a sense, that's what, the whole gender fluidity thing is about. Think about, one of the things that amazes me is that the gay press hasn't noticed. There's still a selective service system out there. And young men still have to register for the draft, although that's recently been challenged in court again, because women are serving in all roles now. But you have to register according to your biological gender at birth. Why hasn't the gay lobby said anything about that? Have they overlooked it? You know, there's so many inconsistencies in the way we think, and if you want to fight against abortion, you want to fight for the right to life. Well, is a young male's life less valuable than a female's because you can draft him and send him into war? The whole thing, you know, yeah, whether or not you have kids has a tremendous effect on your status in the world, because if you don't have kids, then you're not taking the same chances that other people take with illness and medical expenses and everything. So yeah, like I got caught, sometimes I worked overtime, wasn't paid for it. I worked other people's hours sometimes because I didn't have kids. I was expected to do that. Now what's the reverse side of that? Gender fluidity. The radicals on the left don't even want you to think about somebody's attractiveness in terms of gender norms, because then that harms people who can't compete and who can't make themselves equal in the sense I just described by having their own families with kids. That's the philosophy. It's gotten really crazy out there as to how people are thinking. But it makes a kind of bizarre kind of sense in a way. But that's where I think that we're headed on the policy thing. You know, we've had 20 years of being able to say what we want and have it found and have it be effective. We may not have that world very much longer. You know, you may have to be screened if you want to, even a hosted account. You may very well have to be screened. It will be more liberal than just being published by like it used to be very hard to be published by a book publisher, and there were small presses and so forth. There will be more things published than there were before, but not everybody will be allowed to be online with publishing things to the world unless they meet certain social criteria. And that's what I'm very concerned about. So I think the social credit system idea is a very scary one, but the tech companies are practically implementing it already, you know. So that's the kind of thing I wanted to leave you with today. It's not just whether there's net neutrality, it's not just one issue, it's all of them. And none of these people that are asking you to donate money for their cause and their oppressed minority or something are thinking about any issue other than their own little thing. And they want you to join and be part of their mass. But that just doesn't work. So if I leave this, I may, you know, I have some ideas. The music is one thing. I've got the music to work on there. And there's still the novel and the screenplay. There's still some people interested in film. That's a possibility. But the things I used to do might stop. And it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to join anybody. You know, just shutting people down doesn't mean you're going to get more people joining you to protest. And that's very worrisome that I see this kind of thinking in the emails I get. So that's kind of the thought I kind of wanted to leave you with today.